Hello, listeners. Kathy Lawless, Life Story Curator, bringing you this podcast series, How Did I Get Here? A series of interviews designed for people just starting out in their careers, people in transition, or possibly feeling stuck, and giving them access to the stories of people who have been there, done that, so that they might be inspired with some new ideas, or maybe just comforted knowing they are not alone, that everyone starts somewhere and everyone goes through times of transition and times when they feel stuck. Today, I'm very excited to be interviewing Leslie Jones, who is the founder and CEO of SpiralMethod, which we'll learn more about. And she's also an executive coach and master facilitator. Welcome, Leslie.
Thank you, Kathy. It's so good to be here today.
Well, I'm so excited to interview you. Listeners, Leslie facilitated a Wise Woman retreat. That was 2 years ago, I guess.
Or more. I think it was more.
Obviously, back when we were meeting in person. But anyway, that's when I first met Leslie. And then a mutual friend then said, hey, you guys wanted to connect us. And turns out we already knew each other. So that was so fun of how we got reconnected. But anyway, well, Leslie, before we find out what it means to be the founder and CEO of SpiralMethod, let's, I always like to start with the icebreaker questions. So talk to us about where you grew up, what part of the country, what your family was like, how many, where you were in the birth order, and, how you think that shaped you as a person.
Oh, great. Yeah. I grew up in Michigan. I'm a Michigan girl. We like to drink beer and drive four-wheelers, and I've even shot a gun. I love my Michigan upbringing, actually. Very down to earth and nice people up in Michigan. I grew up in Grand Rapids. My mom was really into Carl Jung and Buddhism and the feminist movement, and my dad was a born-again Christian, JC, and so they had a lot of conflict, actually, which caused me to find my own way and determine what my beliefs were spiritually and otherwise. They're no longer together, thank goodness. Oh. But and I'm the oldest as well, so I'm pretty overly responsible, which I've had to work on unwinding over the years. I've got one brother and one sister.
And what's the age difference?
My sister's 14 months younger. My brother's 5 years younger.
So you and she are probably pretty close. So close in age, and then he's down the road there.
That's right.
Wow, that's a lot of different beliefs, and those are very that isn't the beliefs I expected to hear from your Michigan upbringing. Either one of those.
Right? Yeah. We're pretty unique, I'd say.
Okay, so what activities did you like to do as kids?
Oh, geez. Well, I'm telling my kids this all the time. We would go play in the woods, right? We had a creek. We'd meet our friends in the woods and we'd build forts. I had a gum collection. I wasn't in the, like activities and clubs at school group. We were kind of I was in the group where we got in trouble. We caused trouble.
Oh, the troublemakers. Okay, that's good to know. Good to know.
Yeah.
And how many in your gang?
Probably about 10 of us, but it was 3 girls and the rest were boys. So I always joke about that because I mostly work with men these days, and I think that's a big part of why why I have a skill set with male CEOs and with men is because I heard everything back then. Things I shouldn't have been hearing.
Oh, okay. Now we have some insight as we go through your story. Interesting. So, introvert or extrovert?
Extrovert.
Okay, and probably way on one side of that, I'm guessing, based on knowing you.
Well, Kathy, what's so funny, I mean, I even hesitate saying that now because I think a big part of me is an introvert. I love being alone. I like to take a bath and light candles and be by myself and journal. And so I think I took on extrovert in my life, but I'd say it's balancing out as I'm over 50 now.
Interesting. One of the things I just noticed lately is a lot of my interviews with the oldest firstborns is they're extroverts. And I was like, oh, is this a pattern? Do I need to start tracking that? And then, but a new term I heard was the ambivert. Have you heard that?
Oh, I did recently hear that.
Yeah, one day I heard it twice in the same day, and that was the first time I heard it. I thought, wow, that's something I got to pay attention to. I think that's kind of me too. I can be super extroverted and get a lot of energy from people, and then there's times I'm like, nope, I'm good, just working on my puzzle.
Yeah. Well, and I don't remember the specifics, but something recently I remember around introverts. It's more about how introverts, quote unquote, process, right? And we have these ideas about extrovert, introvert that maybe are becoming outdated, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, because my definition is around, where you get your energy.
Uh-huh.
And that has a lot to do with introvert or extrovert, if it's from others or from within.
Right.
And then obviously there's the expressiveness that I think is sometimes more of the stereotypical about if you're extroverted, you're more expressive than if you're introverted, but that may or may not be the case either. So interesting how you process like that.
Yep.
Okay, on the fun meter scale of 1 to 5, 1 being couch potato and 5 life of the party, where do you put yourself?
3.
3, you're going down the middle.
Yep. It depends on the day.
Oh, and what kind of trouble you can get into, maybe?
Exactly.
We've heard that you might be a troublemaker. Okay, on the risk scale, 1 to 5, 1 being low, 5 high risk taker, where do you put yourself?
Oh, probably 4 or 5.
4 or 5, okay.
Yeah.
So is that more on the, like, are you an adrenaline junkie with that type, or is it more business risk, or?
It's both. I mean, doing things that are uncomfortable or edgy, right? And I often take action before I think.
Oh, okay.
That could be risky.
So is that based on more of I'm an inner knowing versus a thinking things through, just.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Like, well, it feels right and there's energy there. And so why not? And it doesn't matter if 10 people are warning me. It's like they are thinking small.
Ooh.
So I just kind of barrel through, right? Not always the best way to do things, but I would say high risk taker.
High risk, but it sounds like you're in action, which a lot of times being in action is, it feels good. And you get a lot of things done, and it leads to a lot of learning and a lot of great things.
Yep, that's true. Yep.
Cool. Okay, well, I love those questions, getting like a foundation. So now as we go through your story, we'll see how these things play out. So tell us what it means to be the founder and CEO of SpiralMethod and executive coach and master facilitator. And then we'll find out, how did I get here?
Right. What does it mean? Well, I've been an executive coach and facilitator for 25 years now. And so just a ton of in the field, on the ground experience and research. And so I can call myself masterful at coaching and facilitation these days. A couple years ago, I realized, there is a method that I'm using because I always thought I was winging it. And through conversation, it's like, well, okay, there is a method. And so someone at one point a few years back said, why don't you write your method down in an outline? And that turned into an 80-page training manual to begin training other people to do what I do, which is SpiralMethod, right? So a company was born out of one conversation of someone asking me to do an outline. Now, here's a good example of where I take risk, right? Because why not start a new company and train the trainer and invest and grow this? Because I'm just so committed to impact and expansion and having many more people affected by the power and beauty of SpiralMethod. So I've been CEO for 2 years. I'll tell you, after coaching CEOs for over a decade, I thought that I would have learned all the pitfalls and, I would operate differently because I coach CEOs. I know everything about being a CEO, but living it's different than coaching them.
Yeah, being in that seat is different, isn't it?
It really is.
Well, I love how you said, I thought I was winging it, and yet it took 80 pages to write down the winging it. It wasn't like, oh yeah, I got it down in 1 page because I was winging. No, obviously this is a core competency. Right. But yet maybe you couldn't see it because it was just so obvious to you. And wow. Very cool. Those are one of the things I'm finding in these interviews too, is that how, you know, we can't see what sometimes is so much what we are and who we do. We need others to kind of point it out. And then you're like, oh, someone planted that seed. Well, write it down. And then now you created a whole business and a train the trainer. And it is a very powerful method. I know, because I've been through it with you.
Well, thank you, Kathy. And it isn't that interesting. It's like the water that we're swimming in, or like the back of our hand. And so it really does take something to notice and acknowledge all that knowledge, that skill set, that ingrained experience that is wisdom. And I mean, do we have to wait till we're over 50 to do that?
Yeah, what's up with that?
Sure would have been nice to, because connected to that is knowing your value, right? Like,
yeah,
wow, this is really valuable. I feel like I'm a late comer on that in some ways.
Well, I'm right there with you. So thank you for sharing that. That's very cool. And especially sharing the part about, you know, I coach CEOs, so thought I learned a lot during that time. And then now I'm in that seat.
Right.
Okay. So Leslie, then, you know, you were doing this work for 25 years. That gives us some insight, but is this what you wanted to do when you grew up? So, I mean, when you were junior high school, what, you know, what was what did you think you were going to go to college for? Or did you go to college, or what did you think your career was going to be?
Oh my gosh, no, I did not know. I mean, I remember having an image of me being in my 30s with a really hot suit and a briefcase, getting on airplanes and being this professional, young, you know, skilled and really crisp professional woman. And I had no idea what or how. And so when I went to college, I didn't even know what to pick as a major. So I was like, well, I'll do psychology because I like people. And then, wow, I mean, my first job out of college, or around the first job, was in a group home. And then at one point I sold computers, and then I realized I didn't want to sell things. I wanted to sell ideas. And so this, you know, I did have this path of good professional experience, or right, you know, being a salesperson, trying to understand business, working with other people. And then I also had this kind of therapeutic background, and, you know, working with adolescents and adults even, and working in groups and in communities. And so it all kind of, every experience has led me to where I am right now, right? But none of it was defined in the beginning, for sure.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and that notion, I'm not sure who wrote the book about that you can connect the dots backwards, but
oh yeah,
but forwards, you know, to map out a plan. And that's, it's funny, when I started all these interviews, I thought, well, yeah, certainly I'm going to come across all these people that had, oh, I wanted to be X, so I went to college for that, and then I had the plan, and then I became that, and probably of all the, and I'm not, you know, 80 plus interviews now, I would say maybe 10 or 15 of them were that way, and they became that thing. But very few of that 10 or 15 are still doing that thing. That many times there's quite a variation of that thing, or a 180 of that thing. So it's been very interesting to hear how people's lives play out and what's presented in front of them. Like, you know, it sounded like you went psychology, and then you went internship on some therapy, and then you shifted over to maybe sales. Right. But then it's not things, it's more about people. Yeah. You just start kind of peeling the onion, I guess. I don't even know how to explain it. So how did you decide it wasn't things you wanted to sell, it was more people you wanted to deal with? Do you remember that?
Oh, that's interesting.
A moment?
I mean, I first, I just want to comment on that. This whole question of what do you want to be when you grow up? What do you want to be when you grow up? But like, I was expecting you to say out of the 80 interviews that it's probably 90% don't operate like that. Yeah. Right? Like, that's not how it went. But 90% of the kids are coming out thinking that's what, and how we came out of, right?
I have nieces and nephews, which is kind of why I started the podcast. And all I ask, well, what are you going to do? Where are you going to go? What do you want to be? And then, you know, big surprise, they don't know. Now, my one niece does. She's very clear, but she's also changed a few times and it keeps evolving as she's, honing. But the nephews are both like, oh, I don't know. I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. And isn't that so much more aligned with how life actually works?
Absolutely.
You know?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember when I was selling computers, it was I was unhappy. I was like, felt like I was on a hamster wheel. And I think that was that I had that realization like, oh, it's about selling or it's about the people that I like. It's about ideas and opening up possibilities and having impact. Computers aren't really, doing much. They're things, so and I did some sort of a leadership program. I think that was also in that same time frame, where I started getting really inspired about people's thinking and how we're all made up.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
I always liked that stuff. That's why I went into psychology and having an intuition about how people operate. But the idea of putting speakers on stage or guiding conversations that would help people find more joy in their life or more love or more results, like that's when I started getting really excited about another path.
Yeah. Which is also very different than therapy, right? Which I think when people kind of go down the psychology route, I've had several interviews with, oh, I went to psychology because I was interested in human nature and human beings and what drives their behavior. And very many of them start in some sort of internship that's in mental health or groups or kids and almost all of them right away went, ooh, that's not what I wanted. I realized therapy wasn't the route, working with people was, but I had to keep honing and figuring out, well, what does that really look like?
Yeah.
And how do I find that piece where it really makes sense? I mean, one gentleman even went from kind of that mental health space to being a financial planner. And actually
Right.
he did that by selling life insurance first, because he kind of took that ability to communicate with humans and the psychology side and recognize, well, what does that mean for how can I help them?
Right.
And that, anyway, so it's very interesting how his story played out, but I'm hearing that more often than not around, that it starts one way, but it kind of really, really kind of shifts.
Well, I mean, and I remember actually you're reminding me of the moment I really wanted to be a teacher. And I went and researched what it was going to cost to go to school for 4 more years and how much money I would make out when I got out, how much money I would make per year. And it just didn't add up. That was the moment when I had to do that soul searching and realize, what is it about being a teacher that's exciting for me and how much money do I want to make? And I think that was when my entrepreneurial mindset started, right? And there's so many jobs out there and so many limits, right? And that entrepreneurial mindset, like, oh, well, I could actually be a coach and I can still teach people and I can make as much money as I decide that I'm going to make and however I design it, right? And so it was not limited anymore. Mm-hmm.
Wow. So it sounds like you were very purposeful in your research here in terms of making some of these decisions, that when you started, after you went through the first 4 years and then looking at, well, how much does it cost to do something else? Did you pay for your 4 years, or was that something that your parents afforded for you? Or
I had my parents paid for some, and I did have a student loan. I don't even remember now the details, but I contributed a little bit, and I got out of that debt afterwards, right?
Yeah.
I did a lot of waiting tables and bartending throughout my early 20s, at least. That's what sustained me as I tried to figure out this whole career thing.
Yeah. So how did you get some other corporate gigs in there before you went out on your own? Or how did you, because to go out on your own as an executive coach and master facilitator, you seem like you'd have to have experience in that area first. And then.
Yeah. The windy road that I took was group home, selling computers, somewhere in there, the waiting and bartending was in and out probably. Then I started a company with a girlfriend of mine called Kidversations, and we were bringing kids together to create and produce their own TV show. and we were connected with the local TV channel, as well as getting into all the middle schools and getting the principals to promote to their students, and just about to really start to take off that company. It was about to take off. And then I got a phone call. I got recruited from someone in California with a local connection recruited me for a 6-figure income. And so I was like blown out at that point. I'd never even considered 6 figures before. And I became the top sales rep, top partner to the founder of that company. And that's what really started me in the world of transformational work. At one point, after 5 or 6 years, I think, with that person, I realized I was behind the scenes, and I was producing and managing and inputting so much, but my voice wasn't out. I was promoting his voice, and his voice wasn't necessarily the message I wanted to be putting out, right? And so that was a big move. That was the 2 weeks after my first daughter was born. And so there might be something to that, because I just been through childbirth for the first time. I didn't have time to mess around anymore. And I took a huge risk and I quit right when and I was the breadwinner. Those are the things that shape us, though. Those are the turning points. And I just drew a line with what I was willing to do or put up with anymore now that I was a mother. I mean, it's definitely, the timing is relevant. So I don't know if I answered your question, but it's all connected.
Yeah. So you quit, you're a new mom. Is this when you decide I'm going to start my own business? Because I know how to sell. I know how to run this. I know I got the right messaging.
Yes.
Is that when you kind of launched into your own?
Yes. And I was connected to my value enough that I had some good negotiation when I left that company. So I was able to carry some clients with me, and have a little bit of a basis for starting my own coaching. And I remember the first client, I didn't charge a dime. The second client, I charged $1,000 for 3 months. And the third client, I charged $1,000 per month. And just do it, right? Like that was it. I didn't have a curriculum. I didn't have marketing materials. I didn't have it all worked out. It was just get an agreement with someone and start.
So again, taking that action.
Right. So isn't that how most people do it?
I can see why your brain thought you were winging it, but you were in your core competency. So you were winging it, but with all this back, you still, like you said, you've been selling him, but really you were selling you more than you even knew, probably.
Right.
Well, that's cool. So did you go through that? I know I went through this. Selling myself was very different than selling others or other ideas or other products or things. It's been, that whole, we kind of started this conversation about self-worth and value. And so how was that transition for you?
Oh my gosh. I think I still work with that edge, right? Like, I much prefer to invite and allow and let people find their own value in the dialogue, rather than having a sales conversation or promoting myself, right? But I could promote anyone around me on a dime, right? I mean, so I really do think that's a lifelong thing for me, at least. And that was a big turning point. And you know what I did, Kathy? I started to put together a curriculum. And so I actually was able to say I was selling something other than me. Like one-on-one coaching is selling me, but having a 1-year program, I had the thing to sell. That helped a lot.
Yeah. Well, and I notice a lot of entrepreneurs do always talk about their business as a third person. And which, I haven't done it. I was, talking to a gentleman the other day, and he's like, and I know he's a solopreneur, we hit this milestone the other day, and I thought, wow, I hadn't thought of myself as a we, but if you do think of your company as maybe a third person, right, or like you said, you've got a program and here's the results that come out of that program, not I create these results. Yeah, you take the I out of it and it comes, less personal, but just as valuable. I mean, just as important,
Yep.
right? And
Such a good point. I mean, I wish I had just that distinction in my 20s, would have made a big difference, I think. And I'm still learning that around the, separating the company, it's its own entity. The company, the product, the profit, the debt, it's all separate from me. It's that's a good one.
yeah, and the success and the failures, all separate,
Right.
all separate.
All separate. I'll just own the successes. It's fine.
Yeah. That's not what we want, right? So when did you, I mean, working with CEOs, not easy to break into that stratosphere, so to speak. So had you been working with CEOs when you worked with that other gentleman before, and therefore that was part of your pipeline, or did you start targeting that later?
Kathy, I mean, it's so funny. I fell into it, honestly. And so it's so interesting to say that, right? I know I'm very intentional and I'm very crystal clear, and I know the value of writing down my goals and intended results. And you're right, whatever we write down is a much higher likelihood of actually happening, all that. And I've purposely, in my leadership program, someone described me before some programs as someone who would blow with the wind, and after the programs as a force to be reckoned with. At the same time, especially as time goes on and the older I am, I like blowing with the wind, right? And trusting the wind. And so like when I go to a networking event, I often don't even bring cards with me, and I'm not figuring out who I'm going to meet tonight. I go where the energy is. If I'm not having fun in a conversation, I move on to the next conversation. I'm looking for connection and trusting the flow of things. And inevitably, that's when I come out of a networking event, quote unquote, with the best contacts and the people I can't wait to follow up with. And it's not even about business. It's just because there's good energy there. So that's kind of how I fell into working with CEOs as well, as just some really good relationships that were mutually beneficial. And then introductions started to happen. And then I started listening to people saying how sweet it is to work with CEOs. And I think even to this day, if I put my attention on targeting CEOs, I'll get intimidated.
Oh,
do you know what I mean?
mm-hmm.
Like I mean, I target CEOs. That's who I work with. That's my sweet spot. But if I walk in and say, okay, let's figure out all the CEOs that I should be going after right now, I'm not going to be myself. And then it squashes the potential.
Yeah.
That's my experience.
So you show up different than when you're in these events or in these opportunities.
That's right.
Interesting. Yeah. So a couple points there. One was, I appreciate you used the term you fell into it. I got to tell you, when I was in transition, or after I left corporate and was trying to find that next corporate gig, well, number one, I like to call myself a free agent because that felt more powerful than in transition. But I remember I got so frustrated because people would say, well, I just fell into this gig at this place. And I'm like, how do I just fall into something? I'm like, I know a lot of people. I think I'm pretty smart. I have a lot to offer, and all these things that I feel like they did. And yet, how do I fall into this thing?
Yeah. Well, so let's talk about that for a minute. I think there's one thing of saying, I'm going to work with CEOs and I'm going to target certain CEOs, and I have to have my presentation and my elevator pitch all ready to go. And, then going after it at a network party. That's really different than a moment in my career. I remember where I was like month to month cash flow. I was stressed out, and I stepped back and from things I'd learned from the past said, so what do I really want? I want to work with partners that are there, where there's collaboration and creativity, and around the realm of communication and communication training. And I would like to travel a little bit. who do I know that are advocates and resources for me where I could share that vision with them? And I made 2 phone calls. And those 2 phone calls brought me to India a couple times, doing communication work with Microsoft, introduced me to many CEOs locally, right? And so it was that that's called the advocate relationship. They had a desire to partner with me. It was a win-win. And I invited, I didn't call to sell them anything. I called to share my vision and see if there was any resonance in that. And literally it was 2 phone calls, and both of them made a profound difference in the next decade.
Wow. Well, what I love about that too is that your intention about what attributes do I want to work with, around, and what types of work do I want to be doing, not what level. It's like you didn't, like you said, if you had to target a level, that brings a different level of, or a different idea about who you're being and who you're around. Whereas you were like, oh, I want a partner. It's like, I remember a friend telling me one time, she said, I want to be around smart and interesting people.
Uh-huh.
And so, I mean, you think about it, if that's kind of the intention you put out there, you're going to be looking for that, and you're going to find it. And then you're going to find they introduce you to other smart. Now, but you also put the attribute around, communications and how you can add value and that type of thing. Right. So very interesting. Okay. So it's not like you said, I want to be a CEO coach. It was, this is how I want to partner with people, and here's the difference I want to make. And then start calling your network to see who they knew. Yep. And then they introduce you to people that they knew.
Yeah, right. And so thank you for reflecting all of that and summarizing or grounding it. It's so right. And I'm also seeing, CEOs. So the qualities of a CEO are the qualities that I love: decision making, agility, fast pace, straight communication. Right? Those are the types of characteristics that are very aligned and synchronistic with the way that I work. So it's easy and fun for me. There are still people that are in a CEO position that have other qualities or characteristics that are not best for me. Right? So there's still discernment even in that title category. That's another thing I wish that I would have had when I was younger, is to just keep remembering that I get to create what I want. I get to work with the people I want to work with, That's not how we did it in our 20s.
No, and I don't know that message is out there anywhere, right? It's like, no, these are the jobs that are available. This is how you get there. It's go to, do well in school, then go on to college, then go, that there's this next logical step, or socially acceptable steps, I guess. Yeah. And then, and you kind of just take what is given versus creating your own way. But it's, I don't know, maybe that's what's shifting in this whole, millennial, Gen Z, all that stuff, is this notion of I should be able to create my own way in the world.
Yeah. And you got to work. I mean, I think that might be part of the message that's been missing as well. I know these younger kids, including mine, have a bit of, I can create anything with not sleeping all day. You gotta work. I mean, we worked hard to get where we are right now, right? So
I can create anything in my mind. It's like, did it turn into a paycheck? Did it turn into something in the bank account? Right? That's the difference.
Right. Exactly.
Well, Leslie, I can't believe that we're already kind of coming up on some of our timing here. So tell me, what do you think has served you best when you look back on your career then? Is it a personality trait, a strength, maybe a habit? But what do you think served you best?
I mean, perseverance would be the personality trait, and a habit is that, I mean, if it's one habit, it's writing, like writing for myself, learning how to use journaling, knowing how to dump, how to move through emotions through a journal, And inevitably then when I do that kind of writing, the next thing that starts coming out of my brain is the plan, the action items, right? And so I would name journaling as a key piece of the puzzle for how, yeah.
Wow. And then, but thank you for sharing how you journal though too, because sometimes people will list something and, it's like, well, how does that show up on your life? So it almost sounds like you get the noise out and then, then the good stuff can come, huh? Would you describe it as that way?
Right. And so, because if I just sit and write a plan without getting the noise out, if I'm stressed, right? If I'm stressed about something and I write the plan is strewn with stress and it's not coming from a powerful place. So that's been my go-to is if I'm annoyed, agitated, stuck, stressed out, do a paper dump and get, The Artist's Way is a phenomenal book. And she does morning pages. So you just get up every morning and you dump until there's nothing left. And then you look at what you want your day to look like. That was a great practice, probably where I learned a lot of that. So yeah, dumping it all out first, going, oh, well, now I can see some themes here and I see why I feel the way I'm feeling. It's all right in front of me, not in my body anymore. And then, well, now there's 3 actions to take that are really clear.
Yeah. Isn't it funny how when you identify the thing, either by telling someone, and many times you're just spewing, right? If you're feeling funny or you don't even know how you're feeling, why you feel agitated, or like you said, writing it down, once it's out in there, isn't it funny how you can disassociate? And yeah, I find you can really let it go versus if you just keep it in and you keep going, why don't I just feel weird today, but I'm not going to say anything or I'm not going to do anything about it. It'll pass. It doesn't usually pass.
Trying to get over it, right? Trying to push it away or move through it. So yeah, what are the practices that help us transition through those times more effectively, right? Instead of 2 days, it's 2 minutes. If we practice.
Yeah. So you do these morning pages. Wow, that's so thank you for sharing that. Now you also mentioned perseverance. How does that kind of show up in your life?
Oh my gosh.
What's an example of perseverance, I guess, of where that's really stood out?
I mean, like, I can't tell you over the course of my career, especially in the younger phases, hitting a roadblock, either, like working too hard, having babies to take care of, having cash flow issues, that there was a time frame, especially when my kids were younger, where it was pretty stressful. And it wasn't an option to stop. Like, I had clients that counted on me, my children were counting on me, my husband was counting on me. And so, it just was not, there weren't any options. It was, you got to make money, you got to take care of the kids, and you got to take care of your health. So I had to get pretty creative on how to structure a life that had, in my 30s, 3 pretty major responsibilities. And it was on me, right? Like, so yeah, that's what perseverance means to me, is I didn't give myself any option to do anything else but figure it out.
Did you ever think, well, maybe I should go into corporate? Maybe there's corporate executive training or, senior HR roles that you would be coaching again at the, executive level. I mean, was that ever a thought of it? Oh, then I would have, the more steady paycheck with benefits and, bonuses and all of those perks?
You know what? At least 3 or 4 times I went onto LinkedIn to do a job search. And once I would get through that couple hours, I would be right back standing firmly in entrepreneurial mindset, because I did not want to work 40 or 50 hours a week. I didn't want to get dressed to go to an office. I did not want to have a boss. Right. And honestly, the income was less than what was potential and what I had done in those moments. Right. So I would always come full circle and recommit to the business at that point.
So it was sounds like it was one of those other research things that you did back when you were thinking
Right.
that you were like, I want to be a teacher. And then you're like, well, wait a minute, why do I want to do this? And you start looking at your motivation. Well, why am I looking on LinkedIn right now? Why do I think that a job at a company would be,
Right.
better? And then you
Totally.
come back to, no, I'm already invested in this and I can make a bigger difference here. And I just have to buckle down and persevere, right?
That's great, Kathy. I didn't see that, right? I didn't see that before. I think that that kind of legwork feels so powerful to me. I've done it numerous times as well in fantasies about moving to Hawaii and living in a tent down where I swim with the dolphins. And then kind of come full circle back to this house, this community, this friend group, this school system, right?
Mhm.
So I think that's a good practice, is to let ourselves fantasize and take a little trip around LinkedIn or around Hawaii, or and then maybe we won't come right back where we are, but for me that's how it's been, another layer of commitment to where I exactly am right now.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. What just occurred to me is when we were talking about you being a risk taker, you talked about just jumping into things.
Uh-huh.
And yet I feel like you do more research than you just jump into things.
Uh-huh.
So
Interesting.
maybe, you do that, but maybe that's something you've honed over the years.
Right.
But it seems like you do it instead of the risks, you aren't just jumping in, you're really looking at, well, do I want to be a teacher? And then you play out that whole dream and then come back to, oh, well, what do I really want? What's motivating me? Right.
Yep. Right. Good. What's motivating me? Yep. It's probably a little bit of both in terms of research and risk taking, or yeah.
Yeah. But then it sounds like you've also maybe just also jumped, like you said, you also quit your job after you had a baby. And so that was,
Right. Well, and I just decided to buy a 25-foot shuttle bus last year because I want to live in a bus. So now
okay. We weren't getting the full picture. Okay.
I was like, this project has gone on, as many things usually do, much longer and much more of an expense than I had anticipated, right? And my passion hasn't waned, but if I would have researched that, I might not have jumped. That's the balance.
That's hilarious. And so, who I forget who wrote the book Good to Great. Isn't that in the book where they talk about having the right seats on the bus and getting the right people on the bus?
Oh, I think so. It's Collins.
Yes,
Right?
Jim Collins is.
Right.
So you just buy your own bus. That's the deal. Just buy your own bus. And then you can decide what seats should be on the bus and who should be in the bus.
It's all designed. Exactly. No reason to get a used one.
Yeah. Oh, no. Might as well get a customized one right out of the gate, right? If you're going to spend the money.
With my blood, sweat, and tears in it. Oh, boy.
Yeah, well, I will be excited once we get through, I guess, all the vaccinations or whenever we could be together. Maybe that would be your new coaching or retreats could be on the bus, and that we're
exactly right. SpiralMethod's going all around the nation and down
there
the
you go. So like you said, this virtual opportunity that COVID created is now making you, expand nationally, right? So then
exactly.
now, well, let's get on the bus and go meet the people.
That's right. Exactly. Spiraling on the beach. That's the vision.
And I hope we're spiraling upward, right? We're not spiraling downward.
That's right. Yes, we spiral upward.
Upward.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's say we are getting to that point where we probably should wrap up. So I would ask a wrap-up question around what words of wisdom kind of impacted you at some point in your life that really kind of, stuck with you and got you maybe out of a funk, or maybe kind of just got you into action?
It's so funny. These two are popping up. And then I have a quote that I love, but I'm just remembering these. Someone told me that debt is not bad as long as you can pay it off whenever, right away. Right.
Okay.
And my dad always taught me to spend less than you make. Spend less than you make. And I apply that, you know, so I have this relationship around money that is connected to that in business, my personal life, you know, that I've got to be making more than I'm spending. Right? Did I say that backwards before?
Yeah, probably spending less than I'm making. Yeah.
Spend less than you make. And then the quote that I just love, love, love is the way that we spend our days is the way that we spend our lives. And to just really design our lives. And that's how I like to do it, right? If I look at a whole week, I want to be satisfied with the way I lived that week if I was to die next week.
Wow, that's interesting. So putting almost a whole life in a day, you know, just looking at, well, what did so I guess what's occurring for me here is that notion of I'm such a learner. I love learning and growing through conversations like this, through reading, just a variety of things. So I think I think a successful day for me, which then would kind of equate to a successful life, would be that learning and growing. And interesting.
Yep.
Love it. Love it.
Yep.
How do you?
Yeah, well, I just and is every day, are we balanced? Did I have some self-care? Did I connect with good people? Did I take care of my children? Did I produce something? Did I have an impact? Like, right? I mean, if I work 3 days in a row, I'm usually pretty whooped. If I'm like back to back 3 days in a row, that doesn't count with that quote.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or wait for the weekends to relax and have fun, you know, like, no. Work should be fun, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. That notion of working to live or living to work.
Yeah.
But if your work is what you love, many times it doesn't feel like it's work.
Yep.
But if it does take you away from living your life, then many times that can feel like it's, you know, you're not connected to your family, or you're not connected to maybe your values or your beliefs. So
yep, totally.
Very cool. Well, thank you so much. This has been fascinating. And again, it's so cool to kind of circle back with you after spending that time with you in the retreat, because you kind of took us through your method. And, you know, but you also shared a little bit about you, but you created something that day that really, I mean, with the very first introduction, I remember the very first gal that was sitting next to you, who you said, you warned us up front, whoever sat next to you seemed to always set the tone. But that's what you did. I mean, the level of vulnerability and authenticity that occurred immediately was pretty powerful. And that's what we wanted and needed at that retreat for that week, or for that weekend, I guess. So
we so much is possible through each other, right? Learning and having reflection and remembering we're all human and we're in this together. We actually are in this together, and we're better together.
Yes, we are. Yes, we are. Love that. Okay, well, that will be the words of wisdom that we end on.
Yay. Thank you so much, Kathy.
Thank you, Leslie.
It was fun.
And we'll have to circle back after a year when you're not in COVID and you've been on your bus. And we can talk about
awesome.
What you've learned since you've been on the bus. So how did I get here on the bus?
Exactly. Well, thank you.
Awesome. Okay, well, listeners, if you enjoyed today's interview, please subscribe below and you'll be alerted to other interviews as they're published. If you have any questions for me or for Leslie, you can post them on my website, lifestorycurator.com, and I'll make sure to get them to Leslie. I'll also post her social media information so you can find her, because after this interview, I'm sure some of you are going to say, hey, we want to work with Leslie. So I'll give you her information as well. So on that note, I would say to folks, stay safe, stay well, and let's keep sharing those stories.